What if I told you that Middle-earth's greatest craftsmen, the elves and the dwarves, shared a history not of friendship, but of blood and betrayal? Tolkien confirmed both the historical and theological reasons behind the conflict, a divine difference in origin, pride, and purpose. Welcome to You Shall Not Scroll, where we uncover the hidden stories of Tolkien's world. Today, we're diving deep into why elves and dwarves just couldn't get along. The elves were the firstborn, created by the one, Eru Ilúvatar himself. They're immortal and tied to the fate of Arda. The dwarves, on the other hand, were made in secret by Aule the Smith, one of the Valar, before the children of Ilúvatar awoke. The dwarves were not sentient though and tied to Aule's will. When Ilúvatar discovered this, Aule repented and was willing to destroy his creation, but just before he was about to, Eru awarded his lack of pride and blessed the dwarves with life, but told him, "They shall sleep until the coming of the firstborn, but when the time cometh, I will awaken them, and they shall be to thee as children." The divine difference is where the tension begins. The elves and later men are the children of Ilúvatar, his creations, but the dwarves come from Aule, so they are like Eru's adopted children. Another key to understanding the elf and dwarf relationship is both races saw themselves as master builders and shapers of the world. However, elves love beauty for its own sake, while dwarves prize the skill and labor that made it. So fundamentally, elves and dwarves have very different natures. The first contact between the two came before the First Age, with a race of dwarves known as the Petty-dwarves. They had wandered west into Beleriand from the then unknown dwarf strongholds in the Blue Mountains, Belegast and Nograd. The Petty-dwarves were named so due to them being smaller and poorer, as well as wanderers and outcasts. Sadly, these first encounters were brutal. Thingol, the king of the elven realm Doriath, and his people began to spread into Beleriand, where they encountered the Petty-dwarves and did not even think that they were intelligent beings. Tolkien wrote, "They took the Petty-dwarves for animals and slew them, until at last they were driven eastward or destroyed." Mim is the most famous of these dwarves, and his tale is wound in the story of the children of Hurin. Things did improve with time between the elves and the dwarves though, and a working relationship was built. This is when the dwarves of Belegast and Nograd began trading with the elves of Thingol's realm. At first it was peaceful. The dwarves helped Thingol build Menegroth, and the elves praised their skill. The dwarves also helped build the elven kingdom of Nargothrond, the Thousand Caves, where Galadriel's brother, Finrod Felagund, was ruler. Finrod was given the greatest works of the dwarves of the Elder Days, a necklace named the Nauglamír, made of countless gems brought from Valinor by Finrod himself. Despite this, the necklace was incredibly lightweight. It was Finrod's most prized possession. Things were looking promising, but pride and greed soon drove a wedge between them. Finrod and Nargothrond fell during the following years, and a man named Hurin retrieved the Nauglamír out of the ruins. He then, in anger and out of spite for the failed safekeeping of his family, cast the necklace at Thingol's feet for payment and said bitter words. He departed, and Thingol received the necklace and sought to add the Silmaril that Beren and Luthien took from Morgoth's crown to it. At this time there were dwarves from Nograd and Doriath, and Thingol summoned them to work on the famed necklace their forefathers had made and add the Silmaril. But from the moment they laid eyes on the Silmaril, they were changed. Tolkien wrote, "The lust of the dwarves was kindled, and they looked upon the work of their fathers, and thought it fair, and the Silmaril they desired above all treasures." They hid this lust, they thought, from Thingol, and agreed to the task. They succeeded in their mission, and they brought together the greatest work of the dwarves and elves into one, and its beauty was very great. But the moment Thingol was to receive the necklace, the dwarves withheld it and told Thingol he had no right to the Nauglamír. Thingol, unheeded of his peril, told the dwarves they could not demand anything from him, one who awoke with the first elves and years ago uncounted. He then for good measure called the dwarves stunted people and told them to leave. They instead killed him where he stood and escaped with the Nauglamír. They were hunted down, but some escaped. Those who escaped came back with a small army and sacked Doriath. It was counted among the most grievous and sorrowful deeds of the Elder Days. The victorious dwarves were then waylaid on their way home by none other than Beren, who took back the Nauglamír. The event of the Nauglamír is the main reason the elves and the dwarves mistrust and dislike one another moving forward. In the Second Age, the story repeated, but with hope at first. Eregion, the land of the Noldorian elves led by Celebrimbor, stood beside the dwarf kingdom of Khazad-dûm. They shared skills, craft, and even friendship, especially with Celebrimbor and a dwarven master craftsman named Narvi. Tolkien writes, "Great was their friendship, and great the growth of their wealth, both for elves and for dwarves." The doors of Durin, still visible in The Lord of the Rings, were a symbol of that unity, inscribed in both Elvish and Khazad-dûm. But when Sauron, disguised as Anatar, deceived the elves into forging the Rings of Power, trust shattered once more. As soon as Sauron put on the one ring he forged in secret, the elves were able to see through his Anatar guise and knew his intentions. Celebrimbor sent the 3 elven rings he made away to Gil-galad and Lindon and Galadriel and Lorien. He also sent the mightiest of the dwarven rings to Durin III of Khazad-dûm. Sauron reacted by attacking and laying waste to Eregion, where he captured Celebrimbor. Under torture, Celebrimbor disclosed the locations of the lesser rings, but he would not reveal the whereabouts of the 3 elven rings, and he died from his torment. The dwarves did fight with the elves though against Sauron, and they helped Elrond escape to the north, where he found a hidden valley and created Rivendell as a refuge for his people. Tolkien allows these 2 races times of cooperation, which leads to amazing things, even during their darkest moments. By the time of The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings, the ancient wounds still linger. This is first seen with Thorin Oakenshield and Thranduil. The relationship is one of the clearest examples of renewed mistrust in the Third Age. When Thorin and his company were captured in Mirkwood, Thranduil imprisoned them, suspicious of their motives, especially because they refused to explain their purpose. Thorin believed Thranduil wanted to seize the treasure of Erebor, and he remembered that the Elven King had not aided his people when Smaug attacked. Thranduil, in return, saw the Dwarves as stubborn and secretive. This mutual distrust nearly ignited war at the Lonely Mountain during the events of The Hobbit, proving that the ancient wounds of Doriath and Eregion still had not healed. But luckily, Bilbo stepped in and helped mediate with the Arkenstone. Next, we looked at the most well-known example of dwarf and elf relations, with Gimli and Legolas. They began with suspicion and rivalry, exchanging barbs in Rivendell and reacting coldly to old grievances. But their shared trials changed everything. They fought side by side at Helm's Deep, they traveled the paths of the dead together, and most importantly, they shared their love for forest and mountain with each other. Gimli vowed to show Legolas the glittering caves of Agrelond, which Gimli described as more beautiful than all the gems beneath the earth. Legolas in turn promised Gimli that he would show him the beauty of ancient Fangorn Forest. Gimli was also suspicious of Galadriel and her people and Lothlorien when they arrived, but he found only kindness from them. He famously received 3 strands of Galadriel's hair as a parting gift, something not even Feanor could do. Gimli was deeply moved by Galadriel and her gift. After the War of the Ring, Gimli and Legolas made good on their promises and traveled widely together, exploring Fangorn and the Glittering Caves, becoming inseparable wanderers of the Fourth Age. And when Legolas finally sailed into the west, Gimli went with him, the only dwarf ever allowed in the Undying Lands, because of his love for Legolas and because of Lady Galadriel. This moment, the final bridge between these 2 peoples, symbolizes the healing of old rifts in Middle-earth. So why did the elves and dwarves never get along? Because they were never meant to be the same. They came from different creators, loved different things, and valued the world in different ways. And yet, in their moments of unity, they built wonders no single race could match. From the Nauglamír to the Doors of Durin, their combined legacy still shapes Middle-earth. If you enjoyed this dive into Tolkien's deeper lore, subscribe for more explorations of Middle-earth, here on You Shall Not Scroll.